what I bring to the House now is the most fulsome amendment to completely remove DEI from the DoD. We have standards in the military that allow the military to expel racists and white supremacists completely in the absence of DEI programs. We've had those standards in the military for quite some time.
This amendment does nothing to address the recruitment shortfalls that our services are facing, and instead it will only make it more difficult to recruit Americans on diverse backgrounds representing the true makeup of our nation. What are you so afraid of? Why do you keep bringing these divisive issues to the body of this floor? You are out of order. You are exhausting, Mr. Gaetz.
The gentleman is no longer recognized.
When they really come for your rights, and when they really want to erode the Constitution, they don't do it with folks who can be sent home by the voters. They do it with unelected bureaucrats with green eye shades somewhere in some windowless cubicle in the bowels of the ATF. And these braces were invented by Alex Brosco, a U.S. Marine Corps and Army veteran, to help disabled combat veterans better control and safely fire guns at shooting ranges.
My colleagues are so obsessed with dismantling all gun restrictions in this country that they're fighting to allow gun manufacturers to continue exploiting a loophole in stabilizing brace regulations that makes weapons more dangerous. This is not about providing tools to disabled people who want to shoot firearms, many of whom are veterans. And my colleague said there's 10 to 15 million people who they described as weak who need these to shoot. We know that's not what's going on here. These braces are not that. They're manipulation by the gun lobby and gun sellers to skirt regulations on short barrel rifles and increase their sales because they make these firearms more lethal, more accurate, and easier to conceal.
If you have information,
I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Global Times investigative report that that talks about training.
Is this the, I'm sorry, is this the Global Times from China?
No, this is,
well, that's what you read. As a general matter, I don't take Beijing's propaganda at face value.
You pull off a public stunt to try and own the libs, and what you did was you brought in a guy who allegedly shot 2 people and killed one of them. That's where the trust deficit is. So you can play your games, conduct your stunts. We're here to get it done.
my concern would be if your definition of an insurrection is objecting to electors, then there would be many Democrats on the committee that wouldn't be eligible to lead the pledge since so many
That's
objected.
not my definition of an insurrection.
The last Republican president to get sworn in absent Democrat objectors was George Herbert Walker Bush.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Gaetz, I will allow the chairman to determine whether or not someone has participated in insurrection in the United States. I think this language is important.
I'm concerned that you may be disqualifying too many of your own members, Mr. Cicilline.
I'm not concerned about that at all. Then agree to the amendment. Let's make this real. If you want to give someone the right to stand before the House Judiciary Committee and lead the Pledge of Allegiance at a bare minimum, let's guarantee that that person has not participated or supported or in any way helped an overthrow of the government of the United States.
Would the gentleman
yield?
yield?
It's like a simple proposition.
Just to be clear, you're denying that you sought a pardon for yourself?
Yes, that's correct.
Here's some of the under oath testimony from Trump insiders, and I know you've maintained a strong relationship with Donald Trump, but basically, we've got multiple people, the director of White House presidential personnel was a Trump loyalist, lawyer Eric Hirschman, Cassie Hutchinson famously. They all testified under oath that you specifically requested a pardon.
We may get prosecuted because we were defensive of, the president's positions on these things. As broad as you could describe from the beginning. I remember he's from the beginning of time up until today for any and all things.
Mr. Gaetz was personally pushing for a pardon, and he was doing so since early December, advocated for there to be a blanket pardon for members involved in that meeting.
Cassidy Hutchinson is a known liar. So there's this September 5th, 2023 piece in Air and Space Force magazine, and it's titled in part, "Why Diversity Should Scare the Hell Out of Our Adversaries." And I've never seen the fear in someone's eye when they're confronted with diversity, but I seek unanimous consent to enter this Breitbart reporting into the record on the matter, Mr. Chairman. And again, just another example where I know we got to play whack-a-mole, but when people feel as though attending a Turning Point event or referencing God might bring some punishment on them, that can impact some of the recruiting we're talking about. Without objection.
as somebody who not only served in the military but is also an engineer and a STEM professional, it really matters what questions we ask. It really matters how we interpret those questions. And I'm kind of sickened by the fact that we're now at the third time having this conversation about recruiting, and rather than actually listening to the genuine experts here who are saying it's complicated, because indeed it is complicated, we are still marching out these kinds of Breitbart, the provenance unknown questionnaires. I am enormously frustrated that this committee has not spent its time really thinking about the quality of life issues that our men and women and those who are thinking about being part of the service are facing.
President Trump, I believe, is the first president in my lifetime that didn't start any new wars. This is an issue that I know unites some elements of the right and left for the benefit of our communities.
Will the House be in order?
They believe that Mr. McCarthy has earned the position of Speaker of the House because he raised $500 million to get Republicans elected.
The gentleman is not recognized. Gaetz.
Donald John Trump.
Trump. The Honorable Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 1.
And so I nominate President Trump because we must make our country great again, and he can start by making the House of Representatives great again.
I hope you'll vote for Kevin McCarthy, and that's why I'm proud to nominate him for Speaker of the House.
I rise to nominate the most talented, hardest working member of the Republican Conference who just gave a speech with more vision than we have ever heard from the alternative. I'm nominating Jim Jordan. Several believe that one earns the position of Speaker by raising enormous sums of money, and there is no doubt that the individual that was nominated by Mr. Garcia is the LeBron James of special interest fundraising in this town. There is nobody better, but I would suggest that there are qualifications for Speaker. We trust Jim Jordan. I nominate him, and I'm going to vote for him.
Congressman, will you be okay then if there's ultimately a deal struck with moderate Democrats that give Democrats kind of co-control of the committees? You're fine with that?
I assure you that if Democrats join up to elect a moderate Republican, I will resign from the House of Representatives. That is how certain I am.
Gaetz. Present. No member-elect having received a majority of the votes cast, a speaker has not been elected.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Issa just made reference to how important it is for us to display our commitment to the Constitution and to commit to defend it aggressively. So I'd like to offer an amendment to the amendment, adding in the second paragraph where the chair may designate an individual to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, to add the following language. Provided, however, the pledge shall not be led by an individual who supported an insurrection against the government of the United States in any way. Because I think if we adopt this amendment, then we will be truthful in representing that stating this pledge as an affirmation of your defense of democracy and the Constitution. It's hard to take that claim seriously if, in fact, an individual who in any way supported an insurrection against the government of the United States is allowed to lead the pledge. So I would ask Mr. Gaetz to accept this friendly amendment, and I look forward to supporting it.
Would the gentleman yield for
I first ask
question?
Mr. Gaetz if he'll support the amendment. to make sure that someone who led an insurrection against the United States doesn't make a mockery of the Pledge of Allegiance and stand before this committee with their hand over their heart, claiming to support the Constitution.
Mr. Cicilline, my concern would be if your definition of an insurrection is objecting to electors, then there would be many Democrats on the committee that wouldn't be eligible to lead the pledge, since so many
That's not my definition of an insurrection.
The last Republican president to get sworn in absent Democrat objectors was George Herbert Walker Bush.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Gaetz, I will allow the chairman to determine whether or not someone has participated in insurrection in the United States. I think this language is important.
Would the gentleman further yield?
I'm asking Mr. Gaetz, will you now accept the amendment?
Well, I'm concerned that you may be disqualifying too many of your own members, Mr. Cicilline.
I'm not concerned about that at all. Then agree to the amendment.
Would the gentleman yield?
Sure.
If you would consider having your language say any convicted felon, I think we would cover not only that group that you're describing, but many more. And I think as the committee of lawmaking in the purest sense, that's really what you're talking about.
No, it's actually reclaim my time. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about convicted felons. I'm talking about elected.
Anyone that you think
reclaiming my time, Mr. Issa. I'm talking about elected officials who swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, who in any way participated, supported, facilitated, encouraged the insurrection against the government of the United States. That's not too hard a standard. And if you are not prepared to agree that before you have the honor of leading the Pledge of Allegiance before this committee, at a bare minimum, you've demonstrated a commitment to protecting and securing our democracy, I can't support it.
Dr. Call, do we have DOD personnel in Ukraine now?
We do. We have a couple dozen at the embassy.
Other than the embassy, any other personnel?
Nope.
How about CIA? Are they training folks in Ukraine?
Not going to talk about that in an unclassified setting. Happy to talk about that further in the classified briefing.
Is the Azov battalion getting access to U.S. weapons?
Not that I'm aware of, but if you have information,
I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Global Times investigative report that talks about training. It's from the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensics Research Lab, citing that the Azov Battalion was even getting stuff as far back as 2018.
Without objection, so ordered.
Any reason to disagree with that assessment, Dr.
Is this
Paul?
I'm sorry, is this the Global Times from China?
No, this is,
That's what you read.
yeah, it might be. Yeah, would that be a reason?
As a general matter, I don't take Beijing's propaganda.
Well, no,
at
yeah,
face
but just tell me
value.
if the allegation is true or false. I mean,
I don't have any evidence one way or the other. As a general matter, I don't take Beijing's propaganda at face value.
fair enough. I would agree with that assessment.
When George Bush and the FBI and local law enforcement stopped terrorist attacks in America, we didn't say, that was George Bush's terrorist crisis. No, we said, we caught the bad guys, but they can't do that. It's just anything to own Biden, to own the Democrats. And I'm sorry if we don't just rubber stamp this oversight plan, but there's a trust deficit here. And it's not a reflex, it's a response. There's a trust deficit here. And one of the very first committees, the very first committee hearing of this Congress, Mr. Gaetz, after we had all agreed on what the committee's plan was going to be, it was going to be voice voted, everyone agreed, Mr. Gaetz wanted to offer an amendment.
It is my pleasure and distinct honor to introduce to the committee Staff Sergeant Corey Ryan Beekman, an American hero and a constituent of mine residing in Pensacola, Florida. It is my honor to introduce Staff Sergeant Beekman to the committee, and I request that he be permitted to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
But who did he bring in here to say the Pledge of Allegiance? Who did he parade in here in a uniform? Somebody that he met at a gun club, he said, locally. Okay. Mr. Cicilline had the crazy idea that maybe we should vet the people who come in here, make sure they're not insurrectionists. Mr. McClintock, I am not kidding you. Mr. McClintock said, well, it's not like we're going to invite somebody who committed murder. No, he literally said that. It's not like we're going to invite somebody who committed murder. Okay, well, who did Mr. Gaetz bring? He brought Corey Beekman. Corey Beekman, in 2019, was in a standoff with the Michigan police after he was arrested and charged with murder, assault with intent to commit murder, and 2 counts of felony firearm possession. The family of the victims said Mr. Gaetz doing that, it was like getting a dagger stuck in our heart again. We were infuriated when we first saw it. I was disgusted with the whole thing. That's why there's a trust deficit here. You pull off a public stunt to try and own the libs, and what you did was you brought in a guy who allegedly shot 2 people and killed one of them.
And even if my amendment doesn't pass, I want my colleagues to know that this NDAA in the base bill takes a meat cleaver to DEI. And the amendments that we have adopted in the last round of voting have certainly ensured that DEI, regardless of the passage or not of my amendment, will not be a principal feature of our military service if this bill becomes law, and that would be a great thing for our military.
Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker, the maker of this amendment, talked about being exhausting. This issue that he has brought before this body and the committee is exhausting. Just this week, the sponsor of this amendment called diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military a, quote, failed experiment. He has called it cancerous. Just this week, a senator from Alabama stated that it was his opinion that white nationalists are not necessarily racist and refused to denounce white nationalists serving in the military. All of this with the backdrop of the same senator holding up hundreds of military nominations, which is actively hurting our national security, something that this NDAA bill would address. To what end? The U.S. Marine Corps does not have a confirmed commandant as we speak. And yet, just an hour ago, on this very floor, one of the members on the other side of this body said,
my amendment has nothing to do with whether or not colored people or black people or anybody can serve, okay? It has nothing to do with color of your skin, any of that stuff.
I'd like to be recognized to have the words colored people stricken from the record. I find it offensive and very inappropriate.
Mr. Speaker, these comments show exactly why we need diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Every day, our military grows more diverse, more and more reflecting the diversity of our nation.
Excuse me, a point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
No, Mr. Speaker, I've made a point of order. You have to rule on the point of order.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
The gentleman has an obligation to address the chair, not other members. He did not do that. He was out of order, violating the decorum of the House.
The gentleman has not stated a proper point of order.
A parliamentary inquiry, then. I seek recognition to make a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his parliamentary
What is the
question.
Parliamentary mechanism that requires an individual to address the chair? Because if it's not that, and we can address each other, let's do that for the rest of the debate.
The chair will not engage in this dialogue. Would the gentleman like to be recognized first?
I want to be recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman is not recognized.
I'm not recognized for a parliamentary inquiry? I'm not recognized for a parliamentary inquiry?
The chair will not engage with the gentleman.
You know, it's been said once already on this floor, but I don't think it can be said enough. If we ever needed a reason to support DEI training, you need look no further than the debates, the antics that we have seen on this floor today, the childish, yes, actions that we have heard from the other side. In fact, from the backwards, racially insensitive comments spoken on this floor, it seems DEI training would be good right here in the halls of Congress. Chair, we have spent hours in markup already debating DEI, but apparently it wasn't enough. So here we are again, forced to debate yet another bad amendment. Never mind that 40% of our service members identify as members of minority groups, or that 42% of service members of color turn down assignments because of concerns about racism and discrimination that they have experienced. Never mind that almost half of all service members in a recent survey said they've been the subject of racial slurs or jokes in their communities. To say that we do not need DEI is to say racism and discrimination does not exist in our military and in our society. For the sponsor of this amendment to be proud of taking a meat cleaver to DEI flies in the face of all Americans and the diversity that we represent. What this reckless amendment and this obsession over DEI really exposes is a callous disregard for these service members and their experiences.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
They deserve better. America is better than this, and I strongly urge my colleagues to vote no.